For centuries, we've been told what is pure and what is sinful, what is allowed and what is forbidden. Somewhere along the way, we severed the human from the divine. We silenced intuition, shamed the sacred, and buried ancient wisdom. But here, we remember. Welcome to the Forbidden Fruit Podcast, an exploration of the mystical, the intuitive, the cosmic forces that weave our existence. This is a soulful sanctuary where we embrace the strange and unusual and use it as fuel to reclaim the magic, restore the sacred, and discover ultimate truth. Come and share your stories in a space where fierce hearts and fantastical gifts are not only welcomed, but needed. So take a bite. You were never meant to be forbidden. Welcome to the Forbidden Fruit Podcast. I'm your host, Jeanette St.Germain, and we are joined once again by my amazing co-host, Catherine Kells. Today we learn what it means to face our fears and become a master storyteller in our lives. Thank you for joining us. Let's dive in. This is a theme right now with everyone that I'm working with, also for myself, just, being seen, right? These false beliefs that some of us have around not feeling safe to be seen and heard, and how that comes from typically places where we've been wounded. We have trauma in our childhoods or wherever. If we're talking about multidimensionality, we have, lots of different lifetimes we can tap into, but
it's definitely coming up for the collective. It is so funny how the theme shows up in its very unique way for everyone. But the underlying message is still the same behind there. Like, really, it's time now to show up and to say no more to whatever it is that's coming up and to face it and realize that you're the only one that blocked it in the first place.
Exactly. And the other part around fear, I like to remember this for myself, that whenever there's fear or anger or hate or any emotion that doesn't feel loving, then it's the place where love is asking to go. So when I have that as a framework, I'm feeling this discomfort, I'm feeling this fear, I'm feeling this thing. It's not who I am, it's a feeling. And the feeling is giving me information. This is where love is needed. That doesn't mean that we allow people to trample all over us or, throw their stuff on us as some kind of determination of who we are. But from every interaction, if we have that framework of this is where love is asking to go, whether someone is getting triggered by us or we're getting triggered by them or a situation, whatever it is. I really like that for myself. It's helpful. And it helps me to be in a space of witnessing with compassion when something is happening that feels really out of resonance with my system. I can recognize where someone else may be having that same experience. And instead of taking it on as, oh, this person isn't feeling good, they're not happy, so that's something wrong with me. Instead, I can reflect back to them. I can be compassionate and empathetic and say, oh my gosh, that sounds really overwhelming. Or, oh my gosh, I can understand how that might be difficult for you, right? I can just repeat back to them basically what they're saying to me, be the mirror without absorbing. And then it doesn't become this personal thing about me and this trigger that brings up the fear of being me, because God forbid I might be judged or misunderstood or whatever. Right? It's an interesting little dance we play.
It is interesting. And what I think a lot of times people forget is they're thinking about it from their perspective and their experience and saying, oh, okay, well, I don't want to be judged by this person. Or, I don't want to speak up because they might think. And it's so funny because if you really kind of just sit back and pull yourself out of that situation, you have to actually realize that the other person is doing the same thing. They're saying, should I speak up because they might judge me? And what do they think of me? And how do I handle this? And I mean, from your perspective, you might think, well, I can't speak up because of here's my wounding in the past. But that's what they're doing too. And
Exactly.
realizing that we're all just trying our best, trying to navigate, to, read each social situation to the best of our ability,
Yeah.
which for most people is not always great. But that's what's so important to realize, is that it's for most people, this is an issue.
Yeah.
Most people are just trying to figure it out. So knowing that someone else is also struggling, and probably almost everyone you're talking to has got some fear, some struggle that they're working through. I mean, that's life, right?
Hmm.
But realizing that, it's like, then you can start having a little bit of compassion, because if they're also struggling, what's the big deal? Like,
Hmm.
why do you have to beat yourself up more? Because they're doing it themselves.
Hmm.
They're not sure, should they say something? You're not sure, should you say something? Somebody just say something already. Just show up as you are, being who you are. And the funny thing about those fears is whatever's coming up for you, whatever feels sticky and uncomfortable and yucky and you're avoiding dealing with, that is exactly what you're supposed to deal with.
Yep,
And
that's the place where love wants to go.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the more you realize that, before it gets to be this big explosion of problem in your life that you literally can't turn around any direction and not deal with anymore, there's a pattern to how life works. Is first you get those tiny little nudges, and then they get a little bit bigger, and each time is an opportunity for you to show up and face whatever it is. And that theme will continue to play and play and play and get bigger until you can't avoid it, until every aspect of your life is affected by it, until you deal with it. So the faster you learn the pattern, then you can deal with it when it's just a tiny little nudge and is way more comfortable. But even when it's really big, the funny thing is like, you may have a health problem or a family dynamic or a work issue or whatever it is that it keeps coming up, that the longer it takes, the bigger the problem, the harder it is to get out, but you have to get out. You have to stop that pattern. And by stopping that pattern, what you have to do is first go within yourself and figuring out what you are resonating, what a part of you is calling that in. So that means you got to face those fears, the things that you want to avoid and you've been avoiding for so many years. But as soon as you do, then all of a sudden you'll be like, why didn't I do that sooner? Because it's so much better and it feels so, so good when it's done.
Yeah.
But realizing that if you don't do it, it's going to get bigger.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think there's stages of facing our fears, right? We have fears that we feel within ourselves, our own mind gremlins that say certain things. And then we have fears that come up in relation with other people, in relation with things we're creating or wanting to experience in our jobs and our families and relationships. And then we have even larger fears that get triggered around like our collective purpose and collaborating with others. And what does that look like to actually create, not just individually, but collectively with a group or even just one other person. And it keeps going in these ripple effects, right? The reach getting further and further out from the center of the heart and the mind and the experiencing of the fear. So if we don't address it at those spaces of internal awareness, it's going to keep getting bigger until we pay attention. And then we bring all these other people into the soup as well. Um, but it's interesting because I find that taking a step back and looking at myself is one way of addressing the fear. But then sometimes for me, I will feel the fear. I will have this awareness around whatever it is that's coming up in my system. And then there's some part of my system that will say, okay, now you need to share this thing and create the ripple, create that catalyst because it's time for this group or this other person to also look at this is something in themselves that's being called to love, right? And I won't even have this full awareness of it as it's happening, but I do it a lot because there's something in me that feels afraid to be seen and heard by others, right? So I'm really good at looking at my fear inside myself. But in order to transmute it, I actually have to have safe relating with others. Like that is required for me to transmute the fear into love. And so there's this dance that happens, at least in my own experience, where I love myself. I feel good in myself. I can talk to myself. But when it comes to others, and I know other people have this too, right? We're afraid of others judging and whatnot. But we have to test the water, right? We have to test what feels good, what doesn't feel good, what feels safe, what feels authentic. And no matter what, like you said, just keep showing up. Even if everything goes crazy and it becomes chaotic and the very thing you feared, even if that happens, you still do the thing. You feel the fear and do it anyway. Because the fear isn't the truth. The fear is the thing that's asking for evolution, asking for love, asking to be restored to balance. And that's evolving consciousness. So if we're afraid to feel things, if we're
Mm-hmm.
afraid to trigger or get activated, then we're afraid to actually live and grow, from my perspective. But then on the other side of that, we also should be able to give ourselves permission to go into the places that actually feel nourishing. Like I'm not actively seeking out those places of activation, but I'm also not actively seeking out only the places that feel good. It's like I don't want to shortchange any part of the experience. I want to feel it all. The joy and the pleasure, the ecstasy, the bliss, the connection of really feeling seen and heard and in resonance and ready to like skyrocket to the moon, right? Like those connections are so beautiful. But so are the ones that make me feel like I just got punched in the stomach and I'm going to vomit and I'm on fire all at the same time. Right? Those are also really beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and valid. And that fear thing comes in, that ego comes in and says, hey, this doesn't feel good. Are you going to run away from it? And so I have to, in myself, I choose this to hold my feet to the fire and say, no, I'm going to lean into this even more because this is where love is asking to go. And if I pull back, if I retract from fear, from self-preservation, then there's some part of me that doesn't truly believe that I am safe and I'm capable to be myself no matter what. And that, isn't that the purpose, right? To really exist, to be authentic no matter what. So how are we going to do that if we don't put ourselves in all of those different situations and test our resiliency, test our muscle, test it, right? Stretch our rubber
Mm-hmm.
band. I'm not saying you have to break the rubber band, but stretch it, right? So those places where, I mean, oh
Mm-hmm.
my gosh, so many people I'm talking to, including myself, it's like we are afraid right now to speak up and to be seen and heard. And then there's so many others that they're so afraid to not be seen and heard. So they're screaming like at the megaphone. And it's how do we balance these seeming polar opposites that are actually experiencing the exact same thing? Like you said, it's all the same energy. Oh my gosh.
And it's interesting because like you said, I don't go actively seeking out, let's find things to heal. No, that would be pretty crazy. I have enough on my own. But I notice like when things start coming up for me, like the first time I'll be like, that's curious. And then the second time, something very similar, I'll be like, well, that's interesting. Take a little bit of note for it. But then when it starts to come up again the third time, I'll be like, thanks for the message. All right, we're going to do something about this. And I find that the more that you kind of really get in tune with these themes, and staying out of the story of like, oh, he said this, she said this. Like, it's not about the exact detail. It's about how you feel about the situation, how you feel about what's coming up, because it's those feelings. That's where those nuggets are that you can work through. And when these things start coming up for you in that way, then instead of, again, instead of running away, because it'll just get bigger, it'll come up a fourth, a fifth, a 30th time. How many hundreds do you need? Um, but really just saying, what do I need to understand of this? Why am I feeling this way? How do I feel about the way I'm feeling? How do I feel about this dynamic of this situation and the constellation of how, okay, well, it made this person feel this way. And because of that, the other person feels this way, and all these details that's not the point of it, but it's the energy behind it that you're seeking. And then your relationship. And if you can figure out how to clear yourself with that in mind, again, not going in that really fine tune in the weeds details, you're looking at it from more of a higher level and saying, here's the theme. And wherever that little piece in there that sticks out that feels really thorny for you, say, what do you have to teach me? And you sit there and you kind of get uncomfortable, or a lot uncomfortable, or can't escape it uncomfortable, whatever's right for you. And you just sit there and you say, all right, let's work through this. And it's funny because when you do that, all of a sudden the details, the stories, the situations just go away.
Mm-hmm.
They're not a
Yep.
bother anymore. You finished. You worked through it. Yay, you passed. You don't need the test anymore because you've
Mm.
moved through that. And it's interesting because every once in a while, like, you can get completely through it and then it doesn't come up for you again. But then there are those cases where, like this onion, that I love the onion metaphor, it's probably my favorite, where you have another layer of coming back to whoever your true self is. Sometimes the theme that you just work through will come back again, but on a gentler level. It won't necessarily be as intense if because you're looking for another deepening of working through that same theme. And it's interesting because I've noticed a lot of cyclical patterns with the seasons, and certain things come up certain times a year, or every few years, or whatever is the right frequency, because everything in the world is cycles. Every piece of life is a cycle, or a million. Lots of cycles within cycles. So as you're clearing out one more layer and you start to remember that pattern of, oh, okay, here's how we cleared it this last time. What's a deeper layer? How do you get further in there? And again, none of this is with resistance, just going with the flow. You're noticing something and you're saying, all right, I'm going to feel into that. And then you're going to work through that. It is
Yes.
way, way better than just
Mm.
resisting.
Yeah, totally. It's it's interesting because I have a similar framework around looking at the discomfort in myself, where I ask myself, what is the theme around what I'm feeling? What is the deeper theme here? And what is the story I'm creating? So I recognize in myself there's a story. There's a story that's being created, and I'm a master storyteller. Everyone is a master storyteller, right? I believe we are the author of our
But
own
don't tell
book.
anyone. Don't tell anyone because nobody else has this problem, right?
Right, of course
Nobody.
not. Mm. It's like
Just us.
we're all writing stories about our lives. He said, she said, they did this, they did that, yada yada yada. Story, story, story. Okay. So within myself, I recognize I am a storyteller. So what kind of story do I want to write? Right. I have it in the back of my mind, this little metaphor about those choose your own chapter books. Like, I used to
Oh,
read
I
those when
love
I was a kid.
those.
I loved those because I was like, I'm not stuck in a single framework. I have a thing around that, apparently. I don't like to be put in a box. And so I loved those books because it was infinite possibilities, right? In my mind, as I'm reading them, I'm like, oh, I can choose this, I can choose this, I can choose this. And it's going to play out in all these different ways depending on the choices that I make. And at the same time, there's a basic framework of the story, right? The book itself has a framework. It's not just a free for all, full on chaos. There's a framework of the story. So that gave me a sense of stability, groundedness, security, right? And yet also the ability to make these seemingly free will choices, even though every single one of those choices was already scripted. And so those choose your own chapter books are such a great metaphor, I think, for spirituality and evolving consciousness. And how do we take our fear by the hand and walk with it into these different choices in our lives, right? I believe that we have destiny, that we have certain things that are predetermined. And I believe that we have choices. We have free will of how we're going to evolve, how we're going to experience certain themes. And every single possible choice, every single contingency plan is planned out before we ever get here. I just believe that. It makes sense to me. Maybe it's delusional, but it makes sense to me. So I believe that. And from the perspective of how do we move through fear? How do we transmute it? How do we recognize that it's just calling for love? I recognize I'm the storyteller. I recognize I have the power to choose what story I write, what story I believe in, which road I'm going to take, right? All roads lead to Rome. Am I going to take the bumpy road, the long road, the short road, the one under the ocean? You know, which road am I going to take? And then I have a sense of power in a situation that may feel like there's no hope or I feel powerless, right? So it's all these little frameworks that I work with to play in my own mind. I think it keeps me sane in a world that feels not so sane sometimes. But yeah, that idea of zooming out, what's the theme? It's not about what someone did or didn't do or said or didn't say. What is the theme that is being highlighted here? And can we go deeper into that theme? And can we look at it from our own individual perspectives and add to the soup of the themed experience our own version of the story without making it right or wrong, good or bad, truth or fiction? And that's the place of magic, right? When we can go into that soup and recognize that we're all bringing these different ingredients together. I'm hoping that society can get there at some point. That's why it's so important to look at
And
these
how
activated states and these fears, right?
and how empowering is it when you realize that the story that you've been telling in your life, the themes that have been coming up, realizing that you actually scripted it all. And all of these things are so divinely planned out and divinely orchestrated exactly the way you needed it. Because these fears aren't coming up this way for someone else. They aren't coming up for your partner or your kids or your family, not in the same exact way. There may be similarities, maybe at different parts in other people's lives, they go through the same type of thing, but it is timed out so perfectly for you in the exact moment where there's that opportunity to grow. And knowing, I love the choose your own adventure message. I do recall loving reading those as a kid too. So that's pretty fun. But realizing that all possibilities are out there and it just matters what you choose and what possibility you hop onto, because it's almost like the original Mario's when, you had these little clouds or little blocks that move back and forth. Like you could jump on it or you could go underneath it. You could do either one, but one jumps you higher, one might get you past the cliff. All these different possibilities. I was never that much of a gaming person as a kid, so I don't know the right term for it, but I think you can picture it, the little bricks with the moving
Yeah,
stuff.
totally.
And the guy and the little creatures running after you if you don't make a choice. But like all this, it's do you go up? Do you go down? Do you go through the little tube, the pipe that gets you to the next spot? What are your choices? They're all okay. They get you to different things. You learn different lessons. And then at the end, you come out ahead. Now, the definition of head isn't, oh, you've got a big house and, at the end of a cul-de-sac and 16 cars. Like, that's not necessarily a head. It's have you, I mean, maybe it could be. There's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty cool too. But have you grown? Have you learned these lessons that are meant for you? Because the person who lives in the mansion on the end of the hill has different lessons. They're not free of lessons. They're not better. They're not worse. They're not, smarter or stronger or whatever. They're just different. They have different experiences than whatever you're going through. And if you realize this, it's funny because one of my kids' therapists loves to use this phrase, and it's stay in your own lane. And I
Oh,
find it
yes.
actually
Mhm.
very helpful because
Mhm.
when you stop comparing yourself or saying, oh, well, he did something wrong, or she's not doing what she's supposed to, or how come she has this and I don't? These things never come up in my family, of course. My children are totally perfect. Um,
Hmm.
but when you realize that concept is stay in your lane, like put the blinders on, don't pay attention to whatever anyone else is going through and experiencing. The whole idea that you don't have to tattle on other people. Whoa. Would love it if my kids figured that out. But realizing that the more that you focus on yourself and you look within yourself and you face whatever is coming up for you and to move forward, that's what is meant by getting ahead. Like figuring out wherever you're at now and just making forward momentum, working through whatever you're experiencing and just being a little bit more than you were yesterday. To me,
Yeah.
that's success. If
Mm.
you can show up, do your best, even if that means you do everything wrong, wrong, in quotes, even if you think in the moment you failed, all of that is a beautiful opportunity to turn it around if you want to move forward and to learn from the experience. Happy experience, super unpleasant experience, kind of in between, whatever. Just learn, because that's why everyone is here to learn and to become more.
It's so interesting because now we're tapping more into what's the purpose of all of this? What makes life worth living, right? And when we are operating from a place of fear, we stop ourselves from living. So I love that you're bringing presence to these places of lessons, right? These opportunities for growth. But I also like to go even deeper than that because while things can certainly be lessons, I definitely see the themes in my life that repeat, and those are things I'm learning about myself. But I also find that to live a purposeful life, I think that most people in general want to live a life that feels good, that feels purposeful. They want to have some sense of happiness and fulfillment and that idea of success, right? We have external success and then we have the internal, what actually feels successful. And with my clients, I have these like 8 lanes of success or 12 lanes of success. Like we have these frameworks of describing like what is success for you? What does success feel like, look like, smell like? What is it, right? Through all of our senses. What is success in your spiritual life, in your physical body, in your mental health, in your emotional connections, in your relationships, in your job, in your career, in ways that you're of service in the world, or maybe, lots of other areas. But whenever I do that exercise, it's not really about success. It's really about fulfillment and purpose. Because I think human beings are just engineered. We have this blueprint to be little creators running around doing things, building buildings or dropping a rock in the lake and watching the ripple effect, right? We have this blueprint of creating and doing and being something in the world. And especially in our current society, it becomes this external projection of purpose and success. But when we start asking those internal questions, we start looking at what is it that's holding us back from actually feeling fulfilled in life. And then we get to meet a lot of these fears. and these themes and stories and all the things that we're talking about, but centering in that place of being alive. The purpose is to be alive. And in that aliveness, there's a mix of lessons and themes and stories. There's a mix of being present with what truly is, surrendering when that's the call, or initiating when that's the call, like learning to navigate all these different facets of what it is to be alive, like to break it down even further, right? I think, at least for me, one of my core fears is this fear that I won't live life fully, completely, authentically, as wild and untamed and peaceful and serene, all the full gamut, right, of what it is to be alive. And that's going to look different for every single person. But I think we all have that question within us on some level, whether we realize it or not. It's like part of our blueprint.
Well, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people live life from wherever they're at now and just say, oh, here's the things I want to do in the future. Um, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But I have a very interesting experience because one of my earlier jobs that I had was actually taking care of elderly individuals in their home. And it was such an interesting perspective because nobody else was my age doing the same thing that I knew of at the time. All of them were, middle-aged that were helping, which is cool. But from me coming just out of high school and having conversations with these individuals as they were on the end time frame of their life, and they would tell me different stories about their family and about the things they did. They would tell me the things, oh, I wish this and this. I wish I had talked to my daughter more. I wish she was happier. I wish whatever. All these different things. And I started to, again, I love patterns. I started to notice a pattern. And that the most important thing that everyone said, nobody said, I wish I had spent more time at work. I wish I had had a better job. I wish whatever, I had more medals. Like none of that was on the list of I wish. It was always, I wish I had spent more time with my family. I wish our relationship had been healed. There was a lot of adventure involved too. So I wish I had taken these chances and, whether it's gone on these trips or had these experiences, stuff like that, that willingness to be alive and that opportunity to face something that's unknown. And it's like watching from that perspective as a relatively young adult looking and saying, oh, maybe that's maybe there's a secret in there that I should pick up on because I kept seeing
Totally.
this theme time after
Mm.
time after time. And now when I work with clients, I'm realizing that there are people in this middle range of age because oftentimes I'm working with moms, but they're in this middle age and why did why is this all scripted for me? And it's like, well, actually, if you just kind of backwards up a little bit, you can really take a different path in the choose your own adventure and reclaim those little things where you thought you couldn't do it, just reframe it. And then you can take those chances, maybe slightly different than you first had envisioned them, but you can still make those things and make the decision instead of, oh, I don't want to. My daughter and I have a very strained relationship, my oldest. She actually just turned 22. Um, she and I don't talk. And she's very, very headstrong. Um, I also happen to be very, very headstrong. Uh, don't tell anyone.
Mm. Of
Um,
course not.
and, so we would butt heads a lot. But one thing for me is we had this difficult relationship for years. I'm going to blame it on hormones for teenager, but I also take responsibility. So I would have opinions on how things should be done, and she would have opinions, and they would oftentimes not be the same. And since I was mom, I got to just say, this is what it was. So we would have this dynamic where it was very unbalanced. And some things happened after she moved out and stuff. And, she was treating me very disrespectfully. And for a long time, I put up with it because I needed her help with some difficult stuff with my other kids. And so I just put up with it thinking I didn't have another way. And I realized how unhappy I was, how unhappy she was. Nobody was getting anything good out of this.
Mm.
And what I realized was I had to do the hard thing, and that was to face my fear of, will she talk to me after this? And I realized I couldn't move forward and I was going to have so much regret. What if our relationship was like this for the next 30 years? That's what kept running through my head. Oh my, not healthy, not healthy for me or her. So I actually stood up and I set a boundary and I said, this is how it's okay to talk to me. And this is what I'm accepting. And she hasn't talked to me since. And that's her choice. But what I realize is I let go of the pain and the stress of trying to make it work. And I am waiting for the day, and I know it will happen one day, where she'll be like, thanks for doing that, Mom. If she doesn't, that's her choice. But realizing I'm not going to hold that regret for the next 30 years of either not saying it or putting up with how had this experience and then living through all of what I could have lived. I chose a different path. And I am hoping for her that it turns out in a good way as well.
Mm.
But I know I'm not going to live in that fear-based situation.
Yeah. Mm. Thank you for sharing that. I know that that's
Yeah.
vulnerable. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
I'm
I
working through
understand.
making peace with this process because it's
Yeah.
not easy. It's
Mm-mm.
uncomfortable because it's scary. Like, I don't know. Will my daughter talk to me? Will she not? The ball's in her court. Where does
Yeah.
she go with this?
Yeah,
And what does that look like?
I have similar situations with multiple family members. And I've had, I'm the kind of person where if something doesn't feel right, I want to clear the air. I like to have what's called a clearing conversation. And this is something that I am terrified to do. It takes every ounce of courage that I have because the pattern that happens with these quote unquote clearing conversations is that I step forward and I speak a boundary and I share my feelings and I create a space for others to share theirs. And I do my best to come to a place of everyone feeling seen and heard. In these clearing conversations, we actually discuss, all parties, we discuss a pathway moving forward and we come to a plan and everybody agrees to it. And at the end of the clearing conversation, everybody is crying or hugging and agreeing to the whole thing, right? And then inevitably, over the next week, 2 weeks, month, sometimes 2 months, I get ghosted, either slowly or quickly. And everything that was addressed in that clearing conversation ceases to exist. And this has happened so many times in my life. And it creates this sense of terror in my system because I know that I have to show up. I have to say what needs to be said. It will literally make me sick. I will be awake for weeks on end when there is something that is unresolved that's making me physically ill because either I feel slighted or I can tell someone else feels slighted. There's just that energy, right? We can sense it when things aren't
Hmm.
peaceful with those that we care about. And um, with both my biological dad and my stepdad, um, I had to have these clearing conversations. And both of those people with my stepmother, and then my stepdad married another woman that I don't call her stepmother at all. But they just left my life. And I don't really know why. I thought it was resolved. I thought we cleared the air. And so I have to make peace with these situations that I don't understand. I have to let go of the need for an apology or for validation of my own experience. And I also have the capacity to understand their wounding and their story and what they believe that is potentially keeping them in that place of cutting me out of their lives. And with each of these people, I've put the ball in their court. I've said what needed to be said. And I've said, if you wish to be in my life, these are the expectations. This is what I will agree to. And I would love to have you in my life. And that's it. And I was actually having dreams the last month or so around my dad, my biological dad, getting sick or being in the hospital or even dying, and how I would handle that situation if, my brother still speaks to me here and there. And I just kept having this feeling that he was going to come and tell me something. He hasn't, it hasn't occurred, but it's a theme coming up in my system. How do I handle it? This idea of, do I go to a funeral or a celebration of life? Do I show up with entire groups of family members that have literally cut me out, have never spoken to me, but have cut me out because they were told a story that I haven't spoken to some of these people in 5 years, 10 years, or longer? Would I even go to that place and pay my respects? What does that even mean? Right? Like playing with that story in my system. And I just came to the realization that, number one, I'm not going to make that decision until it shows up in front of me. I was wasting a lot of energy projecting myself into a scenario that had not occurred yet.
Possibilities.
Yes. And then I also came to this place in myself of just being present with the awareness that there are people that I've loved and lost, and they may still be walking around on this planet in their physical bodies, but I have grieved them. And I will honor their memory, and I will honor what they brought to my life and the growth that I was able to receive from them being in my life. But that's it. It's so strange to feel as if, especially your parents, that's a weird ball of wax, to feel as if certain parental figures are actually dead, but they're still alive. Um, and that's just how it has to be, because I respect myself and I honor myself and I respect them. I honor them. They have made it very clear that they wish to have no connection with me. And so I respect that. It hurts. It sucks. I don't understand, but I respect it. And I have this with certain people that I considered best friends, people that I considered dear, dear soul family, people that I thought were a part of my soul. And if they request to have absolutely no connection, thy will be done. Because I love myself too much to continue putting myself in places where I am not fully loved, wanted, appreciated, seen and heard and valued. And I refuse to put myself in that situation just because it's respected or not respected. It's an obligation, right? Family, especially.
I love how you called back your energy right there. You're saying that you're not going to go into more stories. You're not going to go and replay different possibilities. I remember when my ex kind of left the picture of the divorce situation that we were in, and he basically just totally skipped out.
Mm.
That's the really short story of a
That's
year,
so tough.
quite a
Oh
few
my
logs.
gosh.
Yes. But since he left all of our lives, I've played periodically over the years a couple different scenarios of what if he showed up? What if he said, "Hey, I'm sorry"? What if he said, "Oh, all of this is your fault"? What if whatever the possibilities are? And I realized first and foremost, there was a couple themes of here's some possibilities, I would say. But then even more so, and the most important piece out of this, I realized, why am I giving him my energy? Why is it my job to
Yes,
decide
yes, yes.
how I'm going to respond to his choices or lack of choices or whatever? It's like just completely control alt delete. Why? And just move forward with that piece of knowing whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And that gives you that sense of freedom
Yeah.
by just facing it and saying, when that fork in the road comes, we'll talk then. We'll
Yeah,
figure
my
out how we deal with it or not deal with it.
my great grandma used to say, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yep.
And I remember that. Like, why do we waste our energy, our time, our precious life force creating these scenarios that may or may not ever occur when we could be focusing on creating what we actually want and being present with what's right in front of us, you know?
And
Like,
that's the power of being the storyteller. You get to
mm-hmm.
decide which script you're reading, how it plays out for you. It doesn't matter, does that person come in chapter 3? Does that person come in chapter 20? Do they never make the cut? That's all up to you.
You
And
can
knowing
cut their
that
chapter
totally that one can
in
get
editing.
completely edited out. Yes, that one doesn't exist.
Mm.
Whatever it is that feels right for you. And then you can always go backwards and say, I made a mistake. I want to change this. I handled it this way before, but I want to upgrade how I did. I want to do something better. You have that power within you because you are the author of your story. And that is like the most empowered taking control of your story, facing that fear of maybe you did make a mistake in the past. You can write it if you want and fix it, or you can also choose to move forward in a different way. Both are right.
Yeah.
There isn't a wrong answer. Well,
Well,
okay, if you do nothing, if you just sit there and do absolutely nothing and you're
you
just
don't
like,
learn
oh,
from
should
it.
I choose this one or that one or this one or that one or that, and you just sit there and tread water for
Mm-hmm.
how many ever years?
I've
That
done that
might
many
be the
times.
wrong answer. But even that, there's teaching within that.
Yep.
So you can still learn from that. So there
Every
you go.
part of
No
it.
wrong answer.
Yep.
It's
Every
your
part of it.
story.
I love it. It's one of the things that I've done to help resolve some of those situations that are really difficult to resolve, like in our human form, right? I am the author of my story and I am super fucking creative. So I believe that I'm a multidimensional, infinite being. I believe I can talk to those that have passed on. I can talk to angels and guardians and trees and animals and other planets and other realms of existence. I do this in a meditative state. I do this for myself. I do this with clients. I love going into those places of the liminal, the multidimensional, and the weird and strange and supernatural. I think it's the most natural thing in the world. So when I have the situations like with my dad and my stepdad, I can't talk to their human self. They have made that clear. But I can talk to my blood and my bones that carries their DNA. I can go into a
Mm.
meditative state and ask for that part of them that helps to create me to be restored to balance and harmony and flow. I can go to their higher self. I can appeal to their angels. I can appeal to their family members on the other side. I can ask for the divine intervention required to resolve, to dissolve, to transmute any and all false beliefs, stories, karmic energy lines, whatever it may be that's creating the energetic drain or the spin, the spiral, the stuckness, the cage that I might be experiencing as a human being, because I can't have that conversation or clear the air, right? We can't clear the energy, but I can appeal to my multidimensional self and ability to ask for help and ask for support and say, hey, can this please be cleared? Can this heaviness be lifted from me? I no longer wish to carry this. I can make that choice. I can tell myself, mind, body, and soul, I choose love. I choose that which is nourishing to me. I ask for forgiveness in any way that I have created trespass or imbalance. And I ask that in my intention of love be restored. I ask that every part of this situation and all of its connections and everyone connected to it be restored to the highest levels of love in the universe. And then I just give it up to the divine. It's up
Mm-hmm.
to them to sort it out. It's not up to me. My little puny human self doesn't know anything and doesn't understand or know the higher plan or the great architecture of creation. I just get a little tiny drop of it when I practice being present. So I can do that. I can write letters to them that I will never send. I can say whatever needs to be said because I don't think that just choosing to move on works for me. I've tried. And I will beat myself up about it too. I'm like, why can't I just move on? Why can't I just let this go? Holy moly, Jeanette, let it go, let it go. But my mind is super stubborn and goes in 10,000 different directions all at once. I have a Gemini moon, so it's like a little fairyland all the time, right? And so I can't convince myself to do the thing that I know I should be doing until I'm ready to do the thing that I choose to do. So I work in those fields. I have those practices and they help me, right? I journal, I write those letters, I set them on fire in my crock pot in the yard. I do some drumming. I do whatever I need to do to process, to get out these emotions and these feelings that are so connected and supercharged, especially with family or with those relationships that we might perceive as soul family, right? Like, let it go, move on sounds wonderful. I personally don't know how to do that without really honoring the full level of everything that I'm feeling around it. Um, I don't know, what's your take on that? Like, how do you process? How do you really move on?
I think every case is totally different. Every detail, whether it's a child, a partner, a parent, whatever the family, the whatever the dynamic in the relationship you
Yeah.
have,
Mm-hmm.
family or not. But certain things, there's certain connections in certain ways, like how are you connected to that individual? You know, what experiences did you share together? Because at every point of contact that you've had with them. If it's a friend, what did you do together? What brought you together? Those create those cords. So releasing in that situation, if it's a friend that you're not going to be friends with for whatever reason or whatever experience, you know, letting go of those cords, letting go of that piece that connected you to them. And through all these things, I actually have done quite a bit of work on my own family, as well as clients. But as my own family, I love to give my family as examples. Sorry to everyone. Too
I
bad.
love it. Share your story. That's what we're here to
Um,
do.
yeah. But so I have a teenager that, um, due to some choices that were made that were not in the highest of anybody, that they had to go away for a little while, um, and to get some help at a facility. And it gave us some time of separation from our family where I could go and of course, you know, since this is what I do for a living, I also do this with my family all the time and they really get sick of it. But that's yay, that's why they signed up to be with me. So, but in going there, like it was layer after layer, I had this chance to finally peel away. What was it that was that dynamic that was connecting this type of behavior, this type of living, this experience that we had all called in? Because so we had this family dynamic that was not healthy. There was lots of mental health issues in my child. Um, and certain circumstances that we don't need details, but weren't good. And I realized throughout this layers and layers of letting go that at each point, it wasn't just, oh, they had a problem. It's, I was relating to that problem. I was identifying to that problem. I was actually being fed and nourished by this dynamic in a very specific way. And it was like, oh, as soon as I realized that, really felt uncomfortable and heavy, but it was like, oh, that's what I'm letting go of. I'm letting go of that unhealthy way of connecting, the unhealthy thoughts and
Mm,
feelings that I was having. And I cleared all of that, which meant clearing out my womb of all resemblance of DNA associated with that particular child. Because you do, when you give birth to a child, you share that
yeah.
lifetime connection.
Yeah.
I cut cords after cords after cords of energy of where it wasn't in the highest of light the way that we were interacting because they were getting something, I was getting something, and it wasn't good. And it has been so beautiful since we have been able to spend time together since that point to see how much, because I chose to face my fear, because during this process, I was wondering, am I ever going to see them again? Are they ever going to come home? What is it going to be like? Will they change? And all I could do, because at that point they weren't willing to talk to us, all I could do is focus on myself and focus on making changes in our home so that we weren't the same. And I did that from me in that saying, okay, I'm going to show up differently. I'm going to make sure that this dynamic doesn't happen with my other children, that we can move forward and we can grow in a healthier way. And for a while, that meant we didn't have contact with that child. And that was tough. Not knowing how were they feeling, how are they experiencing life, were they happy? Because they didn't want to talk to you. We didn't want to talk to them. It was a difficult situation. But going and making those changes and then now seeing coming out the other side of that, seeing how much they actually grew, it is beyond my wildest dreams of what could be possible because I said I wasn't going to take it anymore. I wasn't going to have that experience. That dynamic that wasn't healthy was done. And I said, oh, I only accept something better. I could have never expected how beautiful it has been since then. And so I challenge those listening that if there are relationships that you have, that you could go and live the way that you're living, having those relationships, going through those experiences, or you could say, I only accept better and see what happens because you might just get that. You don't have
Mm.
to, but you might.
Oh, I love that. That's a that's a perfect spot to wrap up this conversation. We have the power to choose. And that's been one of my biggest themes, reclaiming my own power, not giving someone else the power to affect me. How's it going to be if they do this or if they do that? No, I get to say how it's going to be for me. I don't get to say how it is for them. That's on them. My responsibility to someone else lies in how I choose to respond. That's it. How do I choose to respond? If someone comes at me with anger, hate, fear, judgment, I can choose to respond with the same. I can choose to run away. I can choose to get soft, lean in, and listen to the place that's really calling for love. I can choose to do that within myself and for the other person, or not at all, right? Like there's all these beautiful choices. And I can only imagine the amazing growth opportunities that you've moved through with your family. Thank you for sharing. I've got some stories with my family too, which you know some of, but yeah, just so good. All of these ways that we feel the fear and we do it anyway. And we choose
Mhm.
to show up. And here's the really cool part, Catherine. I believe there's no one else on the entire planet just like you or just like me. We are one humanity. We have certain things that are the same, and yet we're all unique. We're these unique expressions of creation. So I can't be anything but me. You can't be anything but you if we're really wanting to be a part of this creation and live fully. To live fully means to be fully ourselves. And isn't that what we're here to do? To live fully. So,
Mhm.
oh, so good.
And I have one last thing. You
Yeah,
know,
sure.
there's something that I've played with for years too. Um, is that, we have all these different fears about what could happen, what might happen. But I always remember that if I choose to do something, I might fail. But if I don't choose to do something, I will fail because I'm not even giving myself a chance. But then there's that third option of what if I don't fail? Sometimes that's uncomfortable. I might say, oh crap, what if I don't? What if people see me? What if people like what I said? You'll never know unless you give yourself that chance and try. And then throw it all the cards up in the air and see where they land.
I love that. That could be a whole nother conversation about failure and success. But for me, I don't believe in failure. I think the only way that
Mhm.
you can fail in quotes is to not try. If you take a step in any direction, a single step, when the path is not in front of you, everything seems dark, you have no idea what you're doing or where you're going. But if you choose to take one step in any direction, some kind of path will make itself known to you. You can always pivot. You could always choose a different path. But
Turn
if you
around, take a step
stay,
back.
yeah, if you stay in one place in that paralysis of fear, fearing all the what ifs or fearing all the repeating of what came before, then you're not going anywhere. That to me is not living, just being in that one little spot because of fear. That's different than being in a spot and staying there because you don't know which way to go and you feel called to go within and be still. But I'm talking
Hmm.
about that fear paralysis that happens. So, yeah, take a step, any step. See what happens. Watch where the chips fall. It might be a mess. It might be a beautiful mess. And all of it's perfectly okay. Anyways, oh, thank you so much for being here and for adding all of your amazing wisdom, sharing your heart, sharing your stories. I always get so much out of these conversations, and I know that whoever is
Hmm.
listening to these podcasts will as well. I know it. So thank you for being brave with
Yeah,
me
thank
and
you.
doing this.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
Hmm.